Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Hopefully you can hear me okay. It does take a little while for people to move from the waiting room into the session, so we'll just give that a bit of time for people to uh, come in. If you can though, assuming you guys can all, let me just check the settings. Yeah, you guys can all chat in the chat box. Can you just pop a message in there and just type it to everyone to make sure that you can actually hear me? Hey Matt, nice to see you on again. I got someone from New Orleans. Wow. Okay. Awesome. Brilliant. Sounds working. So I expected mostly Australia, New Zealand on, but maybe we've got a few people um, in North America on as well. So that'd be good to,
That's cool. Little
yeah, hopefully we
international,
don't, hopefully we don't
international
confuse
vibes.
them. Yeah, with the terminology, there's some slight differences, I think, in
I'll taper down the bogan.
yeah, I already find it hard enough when I moved from the UK to Australia to understand some of the terms we use here. And
Yeah.
I used to work as a landscaper for a little bit of it and trying to impress, and I pretended I knew what he was talking about, what he was saying. I was
Nods.
trying like translate in
Yeah.
my head to the UK term of what he was saying. Yeah, so go through Brisbane.
Seems like the Americans have a bit of banter. He's just asked if we want him to leave, but no, we'd love you to stay.
No, you
Yeah,
can stay.
definitely
You
stay.
can stay. You can stay. Awesome. So everyone can hear me. Yeah, guys, you popped in obviously where you're from. Just if anyone, everyone else can just do that as well, just so we know where people are. It's always good to know. So Adelaide, Newcastle, New South Wales, Brizzy, Sydney, few Newcastles. Yes,
Wagga wagga, Toowoomba.
yeah. Awesome. So
We
we're covering right around the country here and into other countries
awesome.
as well.
Yeah.
So that is awesome to see. It's good to get different perspectives because everyone has different challenges in terms of their own markets and stuff. So appreciate you guys all joining in. We'll get started soon, but I'm assuming you know why you've joined. We're trying to give you a really quick basic run through of how to get started using Buildxact. So Buildxact is a system. I joined 7 years ago. It was really, really simple, really, really easy because there wasn't too much to it. It was a takeoff estimating system with a job management system. Obviously, as we start to add in more and more features with mobile apps and supplier pricing and a bunch of other stuff, that system just becomes a little bit more difficult to learn because there's way more you can get out of it. Same way as using Microsoft Word in 1995 was pretty limited, and now there's a whole heap of stuff you can do with it. So this session is really designed to keep it really, really basic. Some of the things that we feel as a Buildxact team with Ryan and Toby, and then Tara as an estimator partner of ours, who, if you've been on some of these webinars before, you might have seen Tara. We're trying to keep it really simple, really easy for you to understand. Obviously, questions and stuff, happy to answer them. We'll try and keep Ryan, because Ryan's going to be the one presenting here, we're going to try and keep him fairly into what he's going through. And then if any of the bigger diversion questions, we're going to jump into those at the end. So where it makes sense to jump into the questions as it's happening, Ryan, if you're cool, we'll throw those at you. There will be some of the team from Buildxact on the chat as well to answer questions. But yeah, guys, just keep in mind this is a real simple look at the software. We're not going to go into real depth and detail because that is where sometimes I find anyway that people can get stuck. You go in to use Buildxact and you go, right, this is the software for me. It's going to do absolutely everything for me. And you try and learn every single thing in one go, and it becomes a little bit overwhelming. And I always say, when you start driving a car for the first time, you're not learning how to use cruise control. You're not learning how to stick it in sport mode and go as fast as you possibly can. You're driving at that, 10 to 2 position. Your seat's probably right far forward and you're taking it really, really easily. That's what we're here to help you with today, is that part of the software. So I'll just do a bit of an introduction around. So Tara, I'll give you as the guest speaker today. If you could just do an intro about who you are, what you do, what your business does, and how you help Buildxact users.
Well, thank you. So yeah, I'm Tara. I'm the director of Arthaus Projects, and we are a multifaceted construction agency. So we work with builders who use Buildxact doing their estimation, project management, contracts admin. And yeah, we'll run through today a little bit of probably what we do as well, on the back of Ryan going through the software. But yeah, we're Australian based, but we work across Australia. And yeah, I mean, if anybody wants us globally, we're here. So yeah.
Yeah, and there are some webinars that Tara has been on before. So if you go into the Buildxact website under the resources webinars page, there are two webinars that Tara's done a real detailed look at the estimating and the job management. So if you aren't interested in that after this, definitely go and check those out. And Tara has, a bunch of services where she can custom make templates for you and sell templates that she's built as well. And sometimes we find that people go that route. Sometimes people want to build them themselves. There's no right or wrong answer of what we're going to be telling you today. It's just whatever works best for you and your business. So thanks, Tara. Appreciate you coming on again. And I'll throw to Toby next. If you can just do a little intro, please, mate.
Yeah, thanks. My name's Toby. I run the customer success team here in Australia and New Zealand. For AJ, we do have a customer success team in America who can take care of what you need in terms of training. But essentially, we're here to make sure that you succeed on the platform. We're here to give you tailored training. We also generate a lot of the help content as well. So yeah, just all about the product knowledge and making sure that it comes through to you guys in the best form so that you can take it on board and succeed with the platform.
Awesome. Thanks, Toby. And the man, the myth, the legend, the presenter for today, Ryan. Take it away, mate.
Thank you, Julian, for that extended title there. Yeah, my name is Ryan. I'm a customer success manager here at Buildxact. I work in Toby's team. I've been here for I think about 17 months at this stage, have a bit of a background in construction. And basically my job is to train people how to use Buildxact. Usually that's in a one-on-one training, which we offer to all of our subscribers, but also get involved in things like webinars, shooting video content and training content as well, and ensuring that our customers are up to speed with how to best use Buildxact for their own purposes.
Awesome, mate. Thanks for that. So, guys, Ryan's going to get going first, going to share the screen. If you run into any sound issues, just let us know and pop in questions as and when you need to. We'll try and keep Ryan on track as much as possible so we don't veer off too much. Let's get going, mate.
Cool. Bear with me for a moment. And just confirm that you can see my screen, if possible.
We can, mate. Yeah, all good.
Awesome. So I suppose one of the biggest questions that gets asked to me about using Buildxact, especially from like someone that's rather new to Buildxact, is I suppose where to start, but also how to best get time-saving value out of the platform as well. And in terms of the best way to get time-saving value, my answer is always regarding estimate templates and setting an estimate template up so that you can greatly increase the speed of getting quotes out the door. Whenever you create an estimate within Buildxact, and I'll just I'm on the estimates tab here. I'm just going to hit create new. The very first question that Buildxact will ask you is, right, so you want to create an estimate? What template would you like to use to start your estimate? And I suppose what a template is a set of items and cost centers as well. It's basically a starting point for where your estimate can actually kick off from. And a lot of people don't want to basically add in all the items, all the costs, and all the quantities for everything that's going to go into their quote each and every time they create one. So they'll preload a template with all of these sort of costs, items, even quantities as well, to use that as a starting point to create their next estimate. So I suppose that's what we're going to discuss initially today is, first of all, what an estimate template is, and also how you can create your own estimate template. This is an example of one that I've created myself. So you can see that we've got different items within this estimate template, different costs for those items. We've even got quantities as well. But I'll sort of pull back a little bit from this template that I've created, and we'll actually have a look at the options that Buildxact comes with whenever we create a new estimate. So generally, you won't see when you're starting out with Buildxact your own template because you won't have created one yet. But Buildxact does come with a whole host of sample templates that you can use as a bit of a starting point. And they're generally regarding different types of jobs. So you can see extensions, for example, kitchen and bathroom renovations, and even single story, like a full house template as well. These templates that Buildxact provides don't have any costs in them. They don't have any quantities in them. They just have a selection of suggested items and cost centers that we would generally anticipate a user would go through when they're building, in this case, a single-story house template. So yes, you can use one of our sample templates to start with. Certainly a lot of people do that. But as a bit of an example here, I'm going to actually start with a blank estimate and go through the very fundamental basics of how to actually create your own estimate and then turn that into a template. Now, before I continue, I do just want to point out for those people that are coming into Buildxact, perhaps from a different software, or if they've been pricing their jobs up in Excel in the past, we do also have the option to import an estimate from an Excel spreadsheet. So certainly if you are in a situation where you do have an estimate that has been fleshed out and you want to push that into Buildxact in a streamlined way, this option down the bottom, which is actually at the moment quite hidden, would be a great way to go. Now, before I get going, I just want to ask the other panelists if they have any questions, or yeah, we're happy to proceed.
Yeah, no questions at the moment, Ryan, but probably just to add on why we're doing it as a blank estimate, just stripping it all back for you guys to see it with nothing else on the screen sometimes makes it a bit easier. So if you've got up and running using Buildxact, then maybe using one of our templates is the better option. But when we're trying to explain this and how this is going to work, just easier rather than distracting your eyes and jotting around all the other places, keeping you focused on that little bit of area that Ryan's sort of working on. But ultimately where you want to get to, as Ryan will get to in this, is you want to get into a position where you can create your own template and use your own template every single time.
Exactly, and we will go through that process. But as Julian said, I'm going to first create a blank template, and simply by clicking on, create a blank estimate, you'll see that there's nothing in there. There's no items or cost centers that have yet been included. And yeah, we're basically going to start from scratch. Whenever you select to use a template, there'll be this configuration menu on the right-hand side where we essentially just need to give the estimate a name. We call this test. We can select a building type. We've actually just increased the size of this list here for all sorts of different builds. In this case, though, I'm just going to type the word test in, also just to demonstrate the fact that you can just free type any word that you want in there, I believe. Perhaps not. That has just changed, so I'll have to get a bit of clarification on that. I am just going to enter in a job address. I'm going to use the Buildxact office and select a client as well. So all these things are along the right are inherently necessary to actually create the estimate, which is what I'll do now. So I'm going to click on Create Estimate. And now we're actually in an estimate. You can see that the horizontal navigation has appeared, and these are the various tabs that you can input information to eventually populate a quote letter, which is the entire outcome of the estimating process, I suppose. The estimate details page will have a lot of information that we put in, including the works location, the client details as well, and client address. I'm going to move to the plans and takeoff screen. This is generally where we would upload our plans to save time. I'm just going to use our sample plans by clicking on Use Sample Plan there. And now we're getting going with entering information into this particular estimate that we will eventually turn into a template. Now that I've included plans, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a few measurements here. Now, generally, Buildxact will encourage you to start completing takeoffs from the estimate costing screen. But what I did want to point out is the elements that can be saved into a template. And we have recently seen people saving measurements into a template as well. This can be quite useful for several different purposes. So I'm going to first add a category, and I'm going to call this site measurements. And I'm going to add a new measurement in here, and I'm going to call this kitchen, for example. And what I inherently want to do now is I want to click on the takeoff tool from here. And I want to just grab the total square meterage of the kitchen area, just as a demonstration of perhaps what you can use this measurements list for. In this case, I'm going to be using it as a bit of a checklist. So I've done the kitchen there. I'm also going to do the whole site as well, just by hitting add measurement. So I'm going to quickly hit site there. And what I'm going to do now is actually just hit close. Oh, wait, no, sorry. I'm going to zoom in on the entire site, close that down, and just quickly grab the complete area of the site. I'm using my polygon tool to just move around the perimeter of all the elements on the plan here. And the reason that I'm doing this is because these measurements will be able to be used when we're actually forming our estimate costings screen. So I've done the measurement there of 127.03 square meters, and I'm now going to hit close. I've grabbed two measurements, the entire site and also just the kitchen. And we're now going to move into the estimate costing screen, and it will become clear as to why I'm doing this once we sort of discuss, I suppose, the use of an estimate template. I'm now going to go into the estimate costing screen. The purpose of this screen is to add in all the items and elements that are going to be priced up to be included in your quote. As we've started from a blank template, there's nothing in here at the moment. If we were to use perhaps one of the Buildxact sample templates, there would be a list of suggested items. We generally start with preliminaries and move all the way through to the end with a lot of suggested items built into that. As we've started from a blank template, we can inherently now add in the cost centers that we want to see. So just by hitting the add button, I'm going to give this, this category a name and call it preliminaries. And hit save. And now that we've...
I felt you there, Ryan, that you were maybe hoping you weren't going to make a spelling mistake. I felt that little
yeah, I did.
when you were typing it, the pressure on you.
Oh yes, you can feel the
Feel the
amount of eyeballs that are on you at the moment. I'm usually a lot more smoother than this, trust me. So I've added a preliminaries category in, and now anytime that you want to actually load this category with items, you can now hit the add item box here. Generally, we'll see people adding things in like, you know, insurances, perhaps building permits as well. It's very quick to actually load these items in. And of course, the whole idea of an estimate template is that I'm only going to need to do this once. I don't want to have to do this each and every time I create an estimate, which is the whole idea behind an estimate template. At the moment, I'm just manually entering in figures like $10,000 for insurances, perhaps $1,500 for a building permit. I can also then start to add in additional categories as well. So in terms of why I used that, why I created that measurement before for the kitchen, if I actually add a category called kitchen and add an item called perhaps plaster for ceilings, something of that nature, generally what we'd expect people to do would be to complete the takeoff from here. So we can actually click on the takeoff tool, tell Buildxact what unit of measure we want to measure in, and then we can come in here to our kitchen measurement, and that will then, the measurement being 10.09 square meters, and then by hitting accept and save, that measurement will load straight into here. So that's great. That's generally how we would ask people to do those takeoffs. But there are some people that like to actually do all their measurements first as a bit of a checklist to ensure that they're getting all of their appropriate measurements. And because we've already done the measurement here at the start, we could actually then just go into this item here. All the measurements that you have completed within this estimate will be saved in the calculator. And that site measurements category from earlier already has that kitchen measurement there. So I could just then click on the kitchen measurement M1.1, hit equals, and that amount will load straight into there. So there is sort of two approaches there. A lot of people like to have a big list of measurements that they go through when they initially load up their plans. They'll label the measurements exactly what they want to I suppose, call them, and go through a bit of a list of measurements. So upload your plans, go through your list of measurements and get all of those values like I have here. And then once they're in the estimate costing screen, they can then just find the items that are relevant to those measurements, click on the calculator and go, right, so this item here is going to be valued at that amount, which is essentially what I've done here.
Do you mind if I jump in, Ryan, if that's all right?
Please do.
I'm the one that made Ryan do this second bit. So as a business, we would normally recommend people go into your estimate costings and do your measurements in there. Just saves the time having to go into the calculator and do it that way. The reason that I asked Ryan to go through this is because when you do a measurement, generally people will logically name what that measurement is. So plaster the ceilings, waterproofed area, tiled area, floor tiles, walls, whatever that you're calling it, that is what the measurement will be called. So if you've got someone, especially someone that is non-trade minded doing your measurements, it is very easy for you to pre-populate a list in your template for what you are asking that person to go through. So it's fairly easy for them to, I know builders that do this where they get someone in a non-trade capacity to sort of sit there and just do all the simple measurements, and they can go through and cycle through them, and then the builder will apply that to the item costs afterwards, because it's labeled that. If you are doing the measurements in the takeoff inside the costing screen, it will be labeled whatever the item is. Now, if you are rolling up that to a really simple item description, supply and install of wall tiles in the bathroom, it's pretty easy. But what we'll often find is when people start getting a bit more detailed into the software, they start adding really specific items in. That might be X millimeter by X millimeter gray subway tile, blah, 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 blah. And that's what the measurement is called. Now, you might not know if that's for your laundry, if it's for your bathroom, it's for your whatever. So there's no right or wrong way with doing this, by the way. So for me personally, I find that when people are really early on using Buildxact, getting your head around how to use a system by making simple measurements is where I would recommend. Everyone would recommend something different depending on who the builder is and how they work. But that's the difference. One, you're doing all the measurements first, potentially, and applying them to the cost items. The other one is doing it to the cost items and doing it all on one screen.
Yeah, and this is especially relevant for perhaps when we're using catalog items as well. Normally, you'll find that suppliers and sometimes even subcontractors will name their items, and it can be even more convoluted than this, like 90 by 45 treated pine. That's absolutely fine. People can generally understand that, but it can really blow out. Some suppliers name their items something that you would need a lot of building knowledge to actually understand what the hell that actually is. So therefore, by doing a measurement from here and moving down the chain towards the job management stage, anyone without construction experience won't perhaps know what that particular item is used for. So therefore, it can often be better to have, rather than having a measurement that looks like this, and I'll just do a quick takeoff here of 5.62 lineal meters. But if we have a look at the calculator now, a measurement called something like plaster for ceilings, it's a lot easier to understand what that actually refers to, as opposed to something like 90 by 45 radiata right there. If I didn't have construction experience, I perhaps wouldn't even know what that's for.
And I think as well, Ryan, is that there are measurements that you use over and over again, right? So like the waterproofed area might be the same area that you're tiling, or the plaster might be the same area as you're painting, for example. Having a measurement that's called, internal walls could be all for plaster, all for painting, and you just reuse that same thing. But once you call that measurement something in the estimate costings, it is reusing that same name. So that might be the plaster material, or it might be the paint, Dulux, X liters, rather than a logical name of that measurement. Oh, that's the measurement for this part of the house. That's what I'm using. So again, and that's what we always say, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. When you're cooking, you chop onions first, chop peppers first, do whatever you want. Whatever works best for you. I love all these little comparisons, guys. So you're going to hear a few from me today. Tara's probably heard a few already from the sessions that we've done, but no right or wrong way of doing it. Whatever works best for you. If you don't want to double up the work and you want to go straight into the estimate costings, do it. If you've got someone that's non-trade minded in your business and you want them to do all the measurements for you, do it that way, or do it yourself that way. No right or wrong answer.
Yep, and certainly that's why I would like to just sort of point out that that site measurement that I did earlier is perhaps one of the more useful ones. The measurement of the whole site I'm referring to, because for something like plaster for ceilings, if every single area of that site is having plaster put on their ceilings, you can just simply come into the calculator, hit that site measurement, hit equals, and you've already got your quantity set up right there. If you had, floor coverings as well, it might be the case, for example, that floor covering, again, being very diligent about the way I'm spelling things, because Julian already brought that up. For the floor coverings, for example, if you had, say, everything being covered by a certain type of carpet, or perhaps floating floorboards or something like that, except for the kitchen, then you can even get a little bit more sort of involved with it. You can actually load up the site measurement, for example. So that's the measurement of the entire floor plan of the site. Then we can minus the area of the kitchen. So M1.2, which basically means that it's the second measurement in the first category of measurements, which is inherently what 1.2. I think there was a question in the chat about that. So I'm inherently going M1.2, which is the value of the site, minus M1.1, which is the value of the kitchen, because that's perhaps going to be tiled. And we can get a quick sort of measurement about what the floor covering is going to be for the rest of the house. So yeah, having that list of measurements can often be quite useful, because you can just leverage them when you're actually going through and populating quantities into your estimate costing screen.
Yeah, and Ryan there, Toby answered a question in the chat from John about why it's called 1.1. So it's called 1.1 because it's the first category in the measurement, in the measurement section, the plans and takeoffs. So again, using it that way, you could always have the same, measurements being called, everything is 1 is going to be a certain thing. If you set it up that way in your business, everything that's 5 is always going to be a certain thing. You just leave those fields, not filled in as zeroed out if you've got this built in your template, so that you always know site measurements are going to be 1 point something.
Yeah, it actually comes from here.
Yeah.
So you can see that the site measurement is the first category of measurements, and these are the individual measurements within that category. And Buildxact very much follows this throughout the entire process, where there's usually a category and some items that exist within that category. This is replicated in the estimate costing screen, for example, where you can see that plastering is the second category. There's 2.1 and 2.2 underneath that. So yeah, we do follow that similar structure throughout the platform.
I also answered a question in the Q&A just in regards to at what point these plans have been scaled. I'm not too sure if I was typing out a question or an answer when you scaled these plans.
Yes.
Or if we want to recover that.
What I did essentially to save a bit of time was to use our sample plans. Now, I will just delete all the plans and I'll get back to where we started from. So there are two options on the plans and takeoff screen. One of the options is to upload your own plans. The other option is to use our sample plans. If you were to upload your own plans, Buildxact would not know basically what's the scale of those plans would not yet be input. So for example, I'm going to load a set of demo plans that I have here, and I'm going to click import. Buildxact is now reading the individual pages on those plans, and it will ask us to scale them. Now, fortunately, we've got a bit of a quicker, more efficient way of scaling plans in Buildxact at the moment, whereby for any plans that have a common scale, like 1 to 100, we can just come up here, click on 1 to 100, and either apply it just to this page of the plan or to both pages of the plan. The pages are listed across the left-hand side here. I know that both of these pages are at 1 to 100, so I can just quickly hit apply to all plans, hit confirm, and that scaling process has worked, which is fantastic. And I can now hit close. But to make this all a little bit swifter, there is also the option of using our sample plans, and they come pre-scaled. So if I just want to sort of play around in Buildxact and try and experiment and perhaps practice a few takeoffs and things of that nature, I could just hit use sample plan, and these plans are already scaled and ready to go, which is what I did earlier. Cool.
Ryan's like a good TV chef. He had one of those already done that you pulled out of the oven?
Yes, here's one I prepared earlier. Just going to load some prices into here, as it will be necessary later.
I've done cooking and I've done cars. What's next, guys?
Yeah, there's always a long list. I also want to talk about other things that you can add into your estimate template as well. At the moment, I've probably gone a bit too ham on this. Yeah. Let's get this a little bit more reasonable, shall we? 230, yeah, whatever, 50, it's fine. In any case, there are other things that you can add into your estimate template as well. I suppose a lot of the time I'm talking to people about estimate templates, they are concerned primarily with getting categories or cost centers into their estimate, also getting items and costs into their estimate as well. And that's primarily what a lot of people think of when they think of an estimate template. They think, all right, next time I want to create an estimate, I don't want to have to add all these things in again. I don't want to have to add all these prices again. I don't want to set out the format of my estimate costing screen again. So they're pretty happy with just having all of these items and prices loaded in as a starting point for their next estimate. However, there are other things that you can add into your template as well, which will greatly speed up your use of Buildxact. Things like adding markup. So at the moment, you can see for this particular item, plaster for ceilings, we've got a cost of $50, quantity of 127.03, and a total cost of $6,351. At the moment, Buildxact is just adding 10% GST onto that, and we've got a quote total here. So we're not making any money off this item, really. There's no markup just yet. There's several ways that you can add markup in Buildxact. A lot of people will add markup down here. Basically, these 5 figures now represent estimate-wide values. So this is, in fact, the value of our entire estimate to our customer in the quote total. That's the total amount of GST that's been applied. That's the total without GST. That's the raw cost. And we've got $0 of markup at the moment. So a lot of people will have a basic sort of or standard level of markup. And we can easily apply it at the estimate level by clicking on the markup button down here. So if I had a markup of 25%, for example, and an additional 2% just for contingencies, we're effectively now going to be marking up the entire estimate by 27%. We can even round it up to a nearest sort of number to keep it as clean as possible. You'll see that now I've put that round the estimate to the nearest 100. In the background here, you can see that the quote total is now rounded to the nearest 100. But what I'm doing is I'm adding 27% markup to every single item on the estimate all at once. I'm also rounding the total of the estimate to the nearest 100. And I can very quickly now see that I'm going to be earning $8,600 roughly in markup on this job. To forget to put markup on your job is a horrible thing because you'll essentially be working for free. So it is a great idea to put markup into your estimate template. Cool. Just incidentally as well, you can also add markup at a category level. Like if I put 10% here, you'll see that the plastering category now shows this 10% option. You can also add markup at a line item level as well, like plaster for ceilings. If I wanted to add an additional 5% on here, I could certainly do that just to that singular item. But one thing to point out is that I've added 27% down here, added 10% onto the plastering category, which is inherently adding 10% to both of these items. And I've also added 5% here, and these will all add up. And by that, I mean, these items up here, they're being marked up by 27%, which is coming from there. This item here, floor covering, is being marked up by 37% because 27 plus the 10 on the category. And this item here is being marked up by 42% because it's 27 plus 10 plus 5. So just be aware that these markups do have an additive effect, and they will add on. Primarily, I often just see people, the vast majority of people, just using the markup down here because it's much quicker And once it's there, you can see it's there because you've got a value down here. It's not 0. And you can be sure that you're actually making some money on that particular item. Cool. Were there any questions or any thoughts, Julian, before I proceed?
I think you covered it off pretty well for me. There was a question about the scaling side, so I just answered Kelvin there on doing a manual scale by drawing the 2 lines on the plan. If the plan scale that you're viewing, it doesn't seem to add up properly. I don't know if that's printer quality or formatting quality, that maybe people get it that way. But yeah, you can do the manual scale. There's a bunch of videos on there, maybe don't go back to that. But I think that's all good for me. I don't know if the others, Tara or Toby, you've got anything to add there?
No, not really. Oh, actually, sorry, I do. With regards to that markup within the actual category, for certain items, for example, timber across a project, we'll often put our markup straight across the job, which might be that 27%, but within that actual category to cover any wastage factor, because timber just goes when you're on site, we'll often put that markup through there. Or I know you will probably touch on this really soon, Ryan, wastage component that gets built in. So for example, you're going to do your timber framing takeoff. You'll then have quantity, unit of measure. You'll then have your, if you go to the little takeoff tool and the calculator in a second.
Cool. Sorry, I'll just catch up to where you're up to.
No, that's all right. Yeah. So the timber, you do your takeoff, and then you can apply a wastage percentage to that, which will cover, your raw number, which might be 20 lengths or, 100 meters or whatever. And then you'll want to put in another 20% wastage. So that means you've got a buffer in there of what the true number is plus your wastage. Or you can add a percentage markup across that to cover, so you know a dollar value versus just an actual unit of measure value. An extra 20 lengths, or you might have an extra 2K in there. But that 2K that you're putting in there as a contingency, it's always a good little buffer to have in the background in your mind. If something is short, you'll go, sweet, and I've got 2K that I can draw down from there if needed, or it goes back in your pocket.
Yeah, great thing to point out, especially that wastage. Certainly, I'll run through a very simple example, I suppose, of what Tara's mentioned. So I've added an item just called timber, very non-creative title there. But essentially, if I've done my takeoff and I've gotten to 5.5 lineal meters in this case, or if we imagine that's a lot bigger, perhaps like 50 lineal meters or 55, say. If that's the value from the takeoff that you've completed, you, of course, as Tara mentioned, want to allow for a bit more. It's always probably better to have a bit more than a bit less to save on any variations later down the track. So once you have done your takeoff, it'll either display as perhaps a M3.1, or if you've just typed it in, it'll show 55 in this case. We can also use the calculator to ensure that you're covering yourself as well. There is an area here where you can add wastage. And as Tara mentioned, perhaps a good idea would be to add, say, 20% wastage. We can also, again, round up to the nearest unit of measurement. In this case, we're doing lineal meters. So this will ensure that the cleanest numbers are being used, basically. So by adding 20% to 55, I imagine that will be something like 66. Yep, there we go. And there's also this little W here to indicate that wastage has been added to this item.
Yeah, maths, mate. Yeah, the maths is good.
Yeah. It's an unfortunate outcome of having to do maths every single day. So yeah, the wastage is a great way of ensuring that you have enough. As Tara mentioned as well, I believe, another way of doing this is not to add wastage, but instead have perhaps a timber allowance where you're basically just adding additional budget in here to ensure that you're covering yourself as well. I assume that's what you were talking about, Tara, is that correct?
You can do it that way, but it was more in reference to the individual markup being applied to the overall cost center. So you'd have your 27%, but then you'd have maybe an extra 10% on that cost center. And you can see the difference when you go to quote total. Should be able to see the breakdown in what that looks like. So then you can see the markup, additional money that's on there as well.
Yeah, perfect. It's a great way of, I suppose, utilizing the different levels of markup as well. So yeah, just to sort of bring back to basics, anything that you see that's blue in Buildxact is generally something that you can click on, and certainly is the case for this quote total box here. Basically, to go from left to right, we've got the name of the item, the type of item, quantity, unit of measurement, and cost. The quantity is multiplied by the unit cost to get the total price, excluding markup and excluding GST. Buildxact will then add markup on, depending upon where it's placed. In this case, it's being placed in the category and also down here on the estimate as well. Once markup has been added, Buildxact will add 10% GST, and that's the cost to the customer there, 1244.94. We can click on this to actually see how Buildxact has calculated that value, and you can see under the markup area, we've added $306.76 as additional budget for timber in this case. By clicking on Show Breakdown, we'll be able to see that $222.75 has been added by the estimate level markup of 27%, and an additional $82.50 has been added by way of adding 10% markup against the category as well. So yeah, that's certainly a couple of options in terms of covering yourself to ensure that you have as much as you need to complete the job.
Just to add to the flexibility of that markup as well on an individual or category level, Robin's made a point in the question and answers in terms of negative markup. So if you do have, say, a global markup of 20%, but you only want a category to be marked up 10, then you can put a negative markup in there to match up.
Yeah, that's a great point, and certainly something that we see a lot when it comes to things like building permits or certain types of insurances as well. So say, for example, this is a $1,500 building permit. We're adding GST on, so that'd be $1,650. But of course, it's $2,098 because of all the markup. If you ever need to, I suppose, disclude any particular item from this estimate-wide markup, a great place to do that is here, just by putting in a negative value, in this case, negative 27. And that's the wrong item. Thank you very much. There we go, negative 27. So 1650, I believe that 9 cents is from the rounding adjustment that we've put in here. So if I was to turn that off, 1650. So you can see how you can cancel out that that estimate-wide markup as well. So good to know for certain situations. Will also show as a very predominant red flag there. Now, another thing that I wanted to discuss as well is putting recipes in your template as well. Recipes can be another great way of speeding up the process by which you can quote. And it is something that a lot of people that are new to Buildxact get a bit hung up on as well. They assume that they need to create 100 different recipes for all sorts of things and have that all loaded in to basically set up their Buildxact account. In my opinion, it's far more valuable to have an estimate template that you can rely on, including all the information you would generally need from one job to the next. Set up estimate templates is definitely the #1 thing for me. But certainly recipes can also be something that you would set up as you are moving down the track of utilizing Buildxact. To demonstrate a recipe, I'm just going to create a simple one for doors in this case. I'm going to click Add Item and type in the words internal door. And generally, what we would do for any of these items, we would do a takeoff for them one at a time to determine the quantity of these items. What a recipe allows you to do is it allows you to measure multiple items all at once using the same takeoff, using one takeoff rather than many. Next to every single line, we have this Build Recipe button here. If I was to click on that, I can turn this internal door item into a recipe. There's an area for internal notes here. This is just, again, to more so create notes for yourself that you can then use as a reference. So there is the availability of writing notes to yourself in here, which will be viewable by any other users that you have in the Buildxact web platform as well. But yeah, to demonstrate what a recipe is used for, I'm just going to add 4 line items into this recipe. The first one is going to be a type of door. Clearly, if we're putting a door into the building, we will need to order a door. I'm just going to make up some prices here. So $150 for the door. We'll need some hinges. So we'll say 3 hinges at $7 a hinge. We'll need some handles. So internal door, probably a set of passage handles. And finally, I'm going to put in some labor to hang the door as well. The door, there we go. And we'll say that will take an hour to hang a door. Cool, let's review what we've put down here. It's always good to read these things from left to right. So for every door that we're going to put into this build, that's going to include the door itself, 1 each at $150. It's going to include 3 hinges to $7 each. It's going to include a set of door handles that are $50 for a set, and it's going to include 1 hour at a cost of $60 to actually hang the door. Now that I have all the elements of this door here listed out, and certainly I could add more things like skirting, strike plates, all sorts of things. Now that we've listed out everything that's going to go into a door, one single door that is, we can now do the takeoff from here. Inherently, how a recipe works is you list out all the items that are going to go into one of these. So 1 unit of measure. For a door, it's each door, but for decking or flooring, it might be per square meter. For anything to do with concreting, it might be cubic meter. For framing, it might be lineal meter. But the basic premise is I've written out a list of items that will go into each door. And now if I do my takeoff from here, choose the unit of measurement of each, I can now go into my plan. I can drop a dot wherever a door is going to be. Now I am aware of the fact that there's 2 different sizes here. So if I was actually doing this for real, I'd probably copy one recipe and use a different a 720 rather than an 820 door. But the idea is now that I can basically click wherever a door is going to be positioned in the build, dropped 5 of them, hit accept and save, and the quantities have spat out the total that I would need for 5 doors. So you can see the recipe quantity of 5 doors there, and every one of these elements of the door has been quantified and priced up accordingly. Every time that you create a recipe, you can, of course, save it into your own recipe catalog for future use. And to actually browse the recipes that you have saved, once you're in this recipe screen, you can actually browse through your individual recipe catalogs and just load them straight in. But that being said, it's always also good to have them as part of your template, which means that you basically don't need to go searching for any of these recipes. They're already there, basically ready to go. So yeah, there is, I suppose, the issue of having all these recipes set up for a lot of people when they start with Buildxact. It's always my advice that build them as you go, I suppose. So you get to understand the way that recipes work within Buildxact. And so you're also not sort of sidetracked by trying to build up hundreds and hundreds of recipes before you even create one single estimate or estimate template, which is, again, a pitfall that I do see people getting into at sometimes.
Can I just jump in on that recipe that you've built as well, please, Ryan? Are you able to jump in there?
Yeah.
And one really important thing, if you're doing any recipes, and this will translate when you go to create a job and then to your invoicing, you'll see that on the right, there's an actual category function to edit. Yeah, so what that means is that door cost, you want to allocate it to an actual category. And the reason you want to do that is because when you're running your numbers and you're creating these cost centers, which are actual categories, that's actually where money on the job gets pulled for budget. So, for example, at the moment, this recipe's in there as a door recipe, but it doesn't translate to where you want to actually pull that money for budget when you're on a job. And everything that you're doing in an estimate, you really need to think about the next step, because setting up these numbers is great, but how are you going to project manage and manage the numbers? So it's really important to look at your actual categories when you are setting out any recipes and allocate to where you want those budgets to pull from. So, for example, when you make your big template, you have your fix out, and you'd have, which might have your doors, your hinges, your handles, whatever you want to put in there. And then you'd have your carpentry labor, which will be a separate category, because you should always be lining those up separately so you can analyze them properly. And then that way, when you invoice or you charge out, the carpentry labor will get pulled from there. And then all the fix out will get pulled from the fix out budget because you've allocated it across.
Yeah, this is like what Tara's saying there, is that when you get a bit more detailed into using Buildxact, some people want to have their labor separately, some people want to have it all together in terms of where this item or recipe is pulled to. No necessarily right or wrong way when you're starting to use Buildxact. As you start to get more into it, you'll figure out how and what works best for you and your business. And this is where that actual category comes into it. Ryan also didn't fill it out at the start because Ryan's assuming when we get to the job, we're just going to leave it as it is. You want to break it down into labor or to, different components, then yeah, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tara's made a very, very good point. And people often find this once they've run a job through Buildxact the first time. Putting some attention into how your job is going to run following the estimate is something that is inherently quite valuable. Essentially, the outcome of this is that there is just one line item in the category of doors. And on the quote letter that Buildxact will produce, the client will see the cost of all of the items in this recipe under the category of doors, because that's where it's been positioned on the estimate side. However, on the job management side, when you start ordering things or recording actual costs, you can actually break these individual line items out into certain actual categories on the job management side, which is not client facing. So as Tara mentioned, to get, for example, an idea of the total labor costs for carpentry, you may want to send this one line here, this one component of the recipe, to a certain cost center on the job management side for isolating, I suppose, a comparison between the estimate and the actual particular to a carpentry labor cost center. Certainly.
Sorry, just if you can jump back into it, just monitoring the chat and some questions that we could answer live. Just one about adding wastage to an individual item within your recipe.
Yes, you can do that if you'd like to. So certainly, I'm not sure which would be the best example here. Perhaps the labor to hang the door. You can add wastage to an individual line item within a recipe. That's absolutely fine. What we generally suggest is to, I suppose in this example, it would be suggested to add wastage onto a line item within the recipe. If it was, for example, a framing recipe or something like that, you do also have the option of adding wastage to the entire recipe as well. So yeah, there's two options there. You can add them against the line item in the recipe that you anticipate would probably be the most likely thing to add it to. You can see that I've added 15% and we've allowed a little bit extra there. Or you can add it to the entire recipe, which will inherently add it to all the different components at once. So yeah, two options there.
It depends on what it is, really, isn't it? You're not going to add a point. You're not going to add a 5% wastage on a door.
No, I don't imagine so. Not really going to make any sense. But yeah, there are some situations in which that would be beneficial.
And so Brendan Flynn, he's asked a question which I actually have a question on this as well. When you accidentally press the blue button, you see how the recipe goes blue there, and you don't actually want that in your item, because, for example, when I'm doing estimating, I'll type in a whole bunch of new categories because it's all custom. If I've accidentally pressed build recipe, how can I get rid of that function being on there?
If you've accidentally clicked build recipe, at this stage, now that I've just hit build recipe, I can just hit close and it won't actually turn that into a recipe. However, if you have added an item in, for example, let's put a cost in. Let's change this to just say new, because I think new estimate item is treated differently. How do we turn that back from a recipe? The answer is that we cannot at the moment.
Okay.
At least not
Yeah.
not to my knowledge. I feel like I've got a very detailed understanding of Buildxact, but every day there are still some surprises. But at this stage, once a recipe has been created, once a cost has been added in, I believe, and once the description has been changed, we aren't able to revert that back from a recipe to just a singular line item.
Okay, that's
that
cool.
is-
I thought
that-
there might have been something
excellent.
that I didn't know. That's why I
And-
asked the question too.
And we want to keep this simple. This is a getting started. We're trying to keep on the basics as well. So there is a question in there just in regards to, calculating like cladding and, going down to decimals and all that sort of stuff. What I will do is I'll actually add in a link. We do have a qualified estimator who you can book in training with just in regards to recipe building and go through more specific training. So I'll add the link in the chat now.
Yeah, and just maybe Ryan, just conscious of time and move past estimating because we're getting into the hour now. But just one thing I want to add in quickly, and maybe we just need to quickly show it, but make use of the note function. So you can add notes. I know Tara's big on this. Add notes into the category level, in internal notes under the doors option there or wherever. And there's no real limit as far as I'm aware on how much you can add in. So you can be very, very descriptive of things you want to add in. And there's now line item notes as well. So if you want to add a little note in there just to refresh your memory about what you did on a quote 3 months ago or 4 months ago when the client accepted it, and now you're at that stage of the build and you go, what the hell did I mean when I put this thing in there? I do that all the time, just with general day-to-day stuff at home or at work. So make use of that note functionality just to keep you on track. Sometimes it really helps keep your line item description really simple and a more detailed note underneath about what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So the category level notes can be used to just as a point of reference for any internal work. This is not client facing whatsoever and is available whenever you open a category for editing. You can actually create notes for yourself. And this is something that you can expand as well. Tara makes incredibly good use of this, as I have seen. We've also recently brought in line item notes as well, which is what this add notes option is for here. These are just notes that you can add at an individual line item level. And there is also an option to show these notes in the quote letter. So these can potentially be customer facing, whereas these ones are just for internal references, those category level notes. Now, I do want to move on a bit more, I suppose, quickly through the remainder of what we can save into an estimate template. So what I am going to do now is just, I suppose, speed up a little bit. I want to talk about other things that you can save into your estimate template. So far, we've talked about saving measurements lists. Plans are also something you can save into your template. Not too many people would use that unless they're doing project homes or reoccurring builds of a certain model of house. But yes, plans, measurements can be saved. The categories can be saved as well as the items that exist within those categories. We can also save the internal notes. We can save markup into a template, and we can save the costs into a template as well. Item notes we've mentioned. Another thing that we can save is specifications too. So Buildxact has a specifications tab here. The information that goes into this specifications tab is actually presented in the quote letter. The whole process of estimating leads towards the quote letter. So that being said, you can supply your customer with additional information about any of the items in your estimate in this specifications area. And a list of specifications, like the one that you can see here, can actually be saved into your template as well, meaning that you don't need to write out a list of specifications each and every time. You can also save a list of specification as a preset here as well. But basically what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people will have a master list of inclusions or specifications, and they'll include it in their template, so it's always there the next time they create an estimate. And then you can just go through and delete perhaps what's not required for the particular job that you're quoting up. So specifications, another great thing that you can save into your estimate template, meaning that you don't need to type it out each and every time. And to add items into the specifications, you can either do it manually from this screen. Similar to the estimate costing screen, you'd just be adding a category and adding items within that category. So in this case, if I wrote, I've already done exclusions up here. So yeah, I could just write in a list of what the quote doesn't include perhaps. And yeah, having that included as part of your template is great. Another quick way of doing it is next to any item on the estimate costing screen, you can just click the S button, which will push the category and the item into the specifications list as well. I believe that's the one that I just added in there. Insurances was the one I just added in, I believe, was it? Yep, there we go. So you can quickly add things into the specifications tab by clicking the S button. The same is true of the schedule, which is another thing you can save into an estimate template. So throughout the course of creating the estimate, next to any line item that has a cost associated with it, we can just simply click the T button here, and that will populate the category of preliminaries and the line item of insurances into our schedule. We have two schedules in Buildxact. One's on the estimating side that we're looking at now, and the other's on the job management side. Some people like to provide an estimated timeline of events whilst they're working out their quote. So this is something that you can actually do on the estimating side now. And yeah, by clicking the T button, you can quickly add items in. You can then expand the task or the category out to indicate how long it's going to take, drag it along to indicate what dates it's going to fall on, even color code it. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do here. You can also add items into or add tasks into the schedule manually as well. Now that I've created this category of preliminaries, if I wanted to add an additional task, I can just click the plus button. So in this case, it's going to be remember to sort out the building permit. This is often used for items that don't have a cost associated with them. This is just a reminder, for example. So you can add items in manually like that as well. Whilst you can save any estimate, any schedule that you have created as a template, a schedule template, you can also more broadly save this into your estimate template as well. So it does get a bit confusing that we call schedule templates and estimate templates, but once you sort of get through using Buildxact for the first couple of times, it all becomes quite clear.
Yeah, it's a good little feature because you have lots of little templates inside a big template that you can chop and change around. And to Ryan's point there, when you're in the estimate costings and you add T to bring that task in, that's going to label that line item exactly what it is in the estimate. And this is why sometimes going and doing a manual template at the first time rather than pushing it through from your estimate is good, because how you estimate an item isn't necessarily how you manage a job. You putting in there that it's subway tiles and all the recipe items that come with that, or line items, isn't necessarily how you're going to put a schedule. You might not want 200, 300 different tasks in a schedule. You might be one of those people that says, hey, the bathroom is only going to have 1 or 2 things, and I'm going to break it down into demo and then, you know, the main installing of everything. So again, no right or wrong way of doing this. If you're someone that is one of those really detailed people that wants everything broken down, make it really detailed. If you want something really simple, keep it really simple and rolled up. My recommendation is always do your first one manually from scratch, because it just helps you figure out where everything is and how all the buttons work. Save as a template. You might only get 40% efficiency out of that template the first time, and then every time you do it more and more again, like other areas of the system, you're going to figure out the way you work in Buildxact and make it more, you know, custom to yourself and your business.
Yeah, it can take a lot of time to create a schedule. So certainly it's once you have created that schedule, certainly clicking on templates and then clicking save as template can be great, which will just mean that the next time when you basically don't have anything in your schedule like this, you can just quickly come in here, select your template, hit apply selected template, select the start date, hit apply, and that's what we worked out before. So we can just load it straight in. Whoops, sorry about that. We can just load it straight in and perhaps tweak anything that is, you know, completely specific to this job, or this estimate rather. Cool. And also just to mention as well, we do have a lot of training videos on all of the topics that I'm discussing, that do dive a lot deeper into each and every one of these elements that I'm discussing. So certainly do check out our training content if you're interested. We also do run training sessions as well. So I'm sure Toby will put the link to our help center in the chat, which will enable you to, yeah, have a look at our help content. Now, the last thing that I wanted to discuss when it comes to templates in Buildxact is the quote letter. And this is perhaps the most vital thing. It is the outcome of the estimating process. The idea being that all the information you put in the preceding tabs is now going to be generating a quote letter for you. Our quote letter is customizable, and we can see the various different sections of the quote letter here as well. There are 8 of them. We've already had a look at the specifications one. But yeah, there's quite a few different sections in here. They can all be toggled on or off depending upon whether you need them or not. Essentially, we have a cover page, a cover letter as well. We've got a quoted items section, which is a summary of the estimate costing screen. I'm showing cost at the category level at the moment. A section for allowances or PC or PS items. The area of specifications and inclusions will show the information that's been put into the specifications tab. You can see you can get pretty down with it, down the the path of actually adding in pictures of items as well. Finally, we've got a quote summary section, which is inherently just at the bottom line price for the entire estimate, a terms and conditions section, and a back page as well. A lot of people do not like perhaps the background image that we provide. They may wish to change the content of the quote letter, the cover letter itself. So every single section of this quote letter can actually be customized. For example, by clicking on the cover page, you can change the background image of what your cover letter is going to look like, or cover page rather. You can change the content of the cover letter just by clicking on letter and changing what it says in here. Similarly to that, there's a lot of options when it comes to how to show costs to a client, in terms of whether you want to specify just the quote totals for categories. A lot of people like this because it keeps it pretty broad. It just shows the total for each category. Some people like to be a lot more detailed. Other people figure that the more detail you provide in a quote letter, the more ammunition you have provided to your customer to pull your quote apart. But you know, people like to use it in different ways. So we do offer the flexibility of perhaps showing the items in each category, even including the quantities, including the costs, even showing $0 items. And that's something that I will refer to in a little bit. But yeah, you can get very detailed with the quote letter. And certainly it does take time to make all of these changes. So if you never want to make those changes again, once you've gone through this list and you've changed everything, saving that series of selections you've made as a new layout is a fantastic thing to do. But also, if you turned this estimate into an estimate template, all these selections would be saved as well. One thing that I really do need to mention is this show $0 items option here. And this is very crucial when we're talking about creating an estimate template. By default, no $0 items will be shown. When you're creating your estimate template, you might want to consider items that you may use, but you may not use as well. So if I create an item called door hardware allowance, and it's got a quantity of 1, but it's got absolutely no cost. So as it has $0, it's not going to be included in the quote letter. It's not going to be included in the job management section. It's not going to be included in anything moving forward. So by that, I mean, you can have items in your estimate template that are just sitting there ready to be priced up if they're needed. If they're not priced up though, and they just show $0, that's fine. You don't have to delete them. You can just leave them there because they're not going to be included in anything moving forward. So a lot of people will overbuild their estimate template to include a lot of items that they may need, but they may not need, and they'll only price them up if they need it, and they don't need to worry about deleting anything because essentially anything with a $0 cost is not going to be included in the process moving forward. Now that we've gone through the entire estimate side of things, we can now talk about actually creating your own template. Now, obviously, this is a very basic estimate that I've created. Yours will probably be a lot more detailed than this, but the concept and the premise is still entirely the same. We've put a lot of information into this estimate, including a specifications list, schedule, quote letter configuration options, obviously the cost centers, the items and the prices, as well as markup, and also this measurements list here. It's a lot of stuff that we've manually entered in. And for the next job, I don't want to have to manually enter all this stuff in again. I mean, this is what I'm going to be using for a particular job. And yeah, I don't want to have to recreate this each and every time I use Buildxact. So now that we've created this estimate, if I want to save everything that I've done and use it for future jobs, what I can do is actually come up here, click on the title page there, and one of the options is create template from this estimate. If I click on that and hit confirm, what I've done is I've saved all of this work that I've done. And you might ask, well, yeah, you've saved an estimate template. Good for you, Ryan. What the hell does that mean? Well, now if I go to my estimates tab and I hit create new, there's that estimate template ready to go. Also, now that I've created a template, in this estimates tab here, a lot of people get sort of distracted by this big list of estimate statuses and stuff. There's also a list of templates. That template that I just saved is going to be the one at the top. And we can see now, this is our template. So you can actually go in and refine your template from here. You can make changes to it. You can add items. You can add quote letter options, specifications, even schedules as well. And the reason that I've gone into the template in this case is that all these measurements that we've done, I actually want to delete some of them. I just want to delete the ones that are specific to that estimate that I did in the past. It's always great when you're showing someone something and it just stalls at a loading screen. But yes, inherently I want to delete these measurements. Every single webinar, there's always a loading screen. And I suppose this is the one.
The way the world works, mate.
What's that, sorry?
The way the world works, it's always when you're presenting that it'll catch you.
Exactly.
Guys, I do know while Ryan's waiting for that to load, and typical, just as I start speaking, it's loaded. We will come to we'll just let Ryan finish off this part of the workflow, and then we'll dive into some of the questions that might be a little bit more detailed.
Cool. Really quickly, the only reason I'm going into this estimate template is to delete these measurements here. I do want to keep these site measurements as a bit of a checklist for the next job that I do, but I don't want to keep the values from that last job because the plans are likely going to change. So I'm just going into my template, deleting the value of those measurements that I did for that particular set of plans. I'm also going to delete the plans, delete all plans. And now that I've saved my estimate template, when I do create a new estimate, I can select that template. All the costs are there, the quantities are there, the items, the categories are there. And now if I give this the name of new estimate and quickly give it a works location, I just wanted to point out that the configuration option looks a bit different now that we've actually loaded it with stuff. We've got some options here, and this is very important. This is basically, we're saying to Buildxact, we want to start a new estimate, and we're using this template. And in this list, it's basically, well, what parts of the template do you want to use for your new estimate? I don't want to use quantities because this next job is going to have different quantities. So those quantities have now disappeared. I do want all the items. I do want all the costs. I want those takeoff measurements. I want the specifications list, the schedule, the quote content. I even want the notes and the line item notes if I have used those as well. So this is essentially an area where you can select what parts of this template do you want to use for your next estimate. And yeah, again, most people only care about that, but there's so much more that you can put in there. If I now hit create estimate, all that stuff that we did before has been saved. I've even got my list of site measurements here. So when I upload my plan, I can go down this list as a bit of a checklist to ensure I've got all my measurements loaded in. And yeah, I've got all my items here. My markup is actually still here as well. It's just showing 0 because nothing's been priced up. Also, my schedule is here. My specs are here as well. And I don't need to enter any of this in again. Just pick up from where I left off. And that's, yeah, probably the biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone starting Buildxact is to have a good estimate template at your fingertips. Cool. I imagine now it would be appropriate to open it up for questioning, Julian.
Yeah, there's a few questions in there, Ryan. Some of them may not have enough time to go through them in detail. But one of the things I did want to point out is that as we're going through this, you'll notice that Ryan is typing a lot in there manually. And that's just really to kind of keep it simple for you guys in terms of when you're first starting to use Buildxact in terms of overcomplicating it. If you have got a connection to a supplier price, I'll say you've got MITRE10 connected in there. When you do a search for an item, it will bring in your supplier pricing catalogs as well. Obviously, just apply a formula to it if it's a recipe, or you know, adjust it based on the measurement that you're doing in there. But supplier pricing is there, a bunch of different suppliers. So go and check that the integrations out that we've got in there, and then connect and start to use supplier pricing wherever you feel is appropriate. We would recommend probably when you first start using Buildxact, I personally anyway wouldn't recommend you go in and put every single item in there, because you'll just find it's quite complicated. It's quite detailed, and it's great that it is detailed, but when you're first starting out, just use maybe the main ones, or just free type it at the start. And then as you get more and more experience, you start to add more things into your recipes. You start figuring out how the formula works. If you've got a liter of paint, or 3 liters of paint, 5 liters of paint, whatever it is, you now know the recipe that you need to account for that. X amount of liters of paint goes to X amount of square meters on a wall, for example. So we purposely didn't go into that detail too much, because again, it can kind of be like you first start using Buildxact and you're looking at the matrix, the green numbers and everything all dotting around. But certainly as you start getting into Buildxact more and more, break things down more and more detailed that is reasonable for you. Don't feel like you need to go in and put every single thing in there from the very beginning.
Yeah. Also, I do want to make mention of the fact that even if you, if you're on our entry level plan, you probably won't see all these tabs along the left. It'll be a much more truncated version. You also won't have the integrations tab here, but be assured that this is still relevant to you, because you can upload your own price lists on an entry plan in the catalogs area, and therefore that functionality is available to you. It's just the case of getting your prices in will be different to just integrating with a supplier.
Yeah, and kind of what Ryan's saying there as well, like say you've got a list from all your subbies of their day rates or hourly rates or whatever, square meter rates, you add that in from an Excel sheet loaded to Buildxact, or add it in manually, and that subby gets back to you in 6 months' time and say, hey, my day rates are going up 10%. You go into Buildxact, you update that thing once in the catalog area, or upload a new Excel sheet that just has the different pricing added onto it, and it will update that particular line item for that subby, day rate, hourly rate, cubic rate, square meter rate, whatever. It'll update it in all the templates that you use, because we know most people do new builds or renos or kitchen, bathrooms. So you might have a situation where you've got multiple templates in Buildxact, not just one that you're using over and over again. Like if you're starting a new template and all you're doing is a bathroom reno, you don't need to worry about having a kitchen and deleting everything from there and all the documents that go into bigger permits and stuff that you need. So just keep it simple. Cool. Hamid Reza, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. You just, for the supplier integration, you just go into the integration of suppliers and it'll all appear up there. But again, if you're not seeing that, that will be because you haven't got the Pro or Teams subscription plan. It will only show that if you've got those. If you've just got an entry, it won't show it. And obviously,
It
you
will
can
it will show the catalogs area though, and you
sorry,
can create your own catalogs in an entry plan, either manually or by importing items from an Excel spreadsheet. So a lot of our users will reach out to the suppliers and subcontractors they deal with most frequently. They'll ask for a spreadsheet of their price lists, and then they'll upload it into Buildxact. It's just the case that, as Julian was mentioning, if your prices do change, you would need to be on top of that supplier or subcontractor to provide you with an updated price list so that you can then upload that on top of the older price list to ensure that your prices are current.
Yeah. Toby, there is a question from Billy there around going through the prime cost provisional sums, all that kind of stuff. Maybe if you've got an article that you could just send over, that'd be great. But maybe Ryan, if you just give a quick like top line summary of what these things do. Obviously, we've gone through S as specifications, T as task, and then just go quick summary of P and N.
P and N, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to add a new category called allowances. I'm now going to add an item called cooktop allowance. In this case, we are sure there is going to be a cooktop as part of this job. However, we don't know what the specific cooktop is, but we do know that we've thrown $2,000 into this job for a cooktop. We don't know what it is. There's an allowance for it, $2,000. To make this a little simpler, I'm going to change this markup to just be 10%, but the premise will still be the same. So, and if this, yeah, it's going to start loading again. The whole idea of the P and N buttons is that they're quite inextricably linked together. By clicking on the P button, what that's going to do is it's going to indicate that this is an allowance item, okay? Meaning that there is budget in here. However, the selection of that item has not yet been made. You can click on the P button and it'll toggle between a prime cost or a provisional sum item. Prime cost is for the expense of an item where the selection has not yet been made. Provisional sum is an estimate for works to be undertaken where the full scope of those works are not yet known. For example, knocking down a wall, not being aware of the services behind it, or digging out a pool and not being aware if there's like rocks and stuff underneath the ground. So yeah, it's a reasonable estimate basically. By clicking the P button on, that's going to have the first effect of sending this item to a specific section of the quote letter called allowances, where all those PC and PS sums will be presented to the client. Now, the very fact that they are being presented to the client brings up the whole nature of cost. This is just an estimate for how much a cooktop is going to cost. And therefore, there's a question of, well, what do we do about markup? Because in that allowances section, it's going to show the cost of the allowance. The cost of the allowance is $2,000, but we've added 10% markup. So the total cost to the customer is $2,420, right? But if we showed that in the allowances section of the quote letter, because they haven't actually selected a cooktop, they might go out and spend $2,420 on a new cooktop. And inherently, that would be spending $200 of your markup. So they're going to be spending your markup and you're not making any money on this item, which is not good. So anytime that you hit the P button, this button next to it, the N button, will activate. And what that's going to do, and you may have noticed, 2420, as soon as I click this, 2200, what that's doing is it's hiding the markup in other places that have been priced up in the quote letter. All right, so it means that you're hiding your markup and it's being absorbed by other items that have been costed out. Now, in this particular example, I haven't really costed anything else out in this job. But yeah, the whole idea of that button is that now the client will see $2,200, which is the cost plus GST. They won't be spending your markup, therefore. And yeah, whether this shows a C or an E, it'll basically mean where that markup is being hidden. If it shows as a C, it's going to be hidden in any other item that's costed out within the same category as the allowance. So by that, I mean, now that I've added an item here for $100, the actual cost of this item is $341 because it's the only item that's absorbing the markup from the cooktop allowance. We can actually see that the cooktop allowance's markup is being hidden in this item here. So C stands for category, and obviously there can be some deleterious effects there. It will inflate the cost of this item incredibly. So a lot of people actually turn it to E, which means that it's actually going to be hidden in every other item that's being quoted out in this estimate. Now, it is the case that I haven't really put a price in. So if I was to do that now on a higher value item, we'll see that the majority of the markup, in fact, everything except for like what $2.12 is being absorbed by this insurances line item. So it's just a way to hide your markup so that your client doesn't spend it, basically. I hope that yeah, makes sense.
That's perfect. I'm just reading a question in here from Thomas, but it was a while ago, so I'm not sure if he's still on the line or not. But do you have any advice on the best way of calculating labor? I have labor as a separate category, which as my labor rate for myself, admin staff, but find it hard to estimate labor within the software, so you usually have to figure it out manually. I guess, Thomas, to be honest, it's probably, this is my opinion anyway, if it's for your own internal time and admin time, it's probably just applying a flat rate to how long you think the job's going to go on for. I don't know if anyone else has any recommendations on that. Like I've seen people do that before where they just apply their own daily rate and just say, we think the job's going to go on for 3 months, we'll put a daily rate of X amount of dollars for 3 months. Tara, you might have an opinion for that one.
Yeah, so if you're wanting to, so can you rephrase that? Sorry.
Yeah, so the question is just how what's the best way of calculating labor for an internal team?
Oh, right. Okay, sorry. So in terms of your labor component, we'll break this out into your project management. Project management, you'll work out a rate. It's generally across a week is easier. Then you'd apply that weekly. So let's say your supervisor or your PM is going to be, depending on the size of the job, I'd say it's a custom job, it's $2,500 a week because he's basically going to be there full time. That's what you've got to think in your mind. If I'm calculating what he's going to cost me, that's what they're doing, or she or he, sorry. And you'd say the job's going to take me 36 weeks. There you go. That's what your actual PM, you should be covering their wage in the job because that's what that's there to do. If you're then working out your labor component for the categories, for example, when I build one of mine, I'll have a like a general ancillaries, which is site setup, pack down, someone going to Bunnings, someone doing all the annoying stuff, general labor. You will work that out against either an hourly, and you might say that you're going to give everybody the same rate. It might be $80 an hour, regardless of whether they're a full qualified carpenter or they are a labourer. And the reason you're doing that is because if the labourer isn't available and you have to get your carpenter, someone still has to do it. You've got to think about if someone's doing that role. And you just work that out against an hourly for a scope of works. For example, across the job, you'll say we're going to, that you're going to have to spend at least an hour a week or 2 hours a week or something doing a Bunnings trip or going to the tip. So you're accounting for things like that. And just itemizing the scopes of works against hours. And as you get into doing more of these and you're either, if you're someone who is the director or you're the builder, and you're out on the tools, you'll have a pretty good idea of how quick your team works. And you've got to remember that what you think it would take you've got to add extra on because no one's going to work as hard as you on the labor side of things. Yes, I'm hoping that answers the question. I'm probably a little too detailed for this being high level, but I think it's important to understand how to minutia that labor because that's something that will often be the thing that blows out on jobs.
Yeah, and I think Ben popped in there in the chat that he puts it into site costs. When variation delays happen on jobs, he can go and adjust that accordingly. So yeah, that's a good way of doing it.
Yeah.
And guys, if you watch the I'll put the links in here for the Buildxact webinar resources into the chat. It is good to go and watch the ones that Tara and I did. I think we did them in end of August, Tara, September sometime.
Yeah,
Um,
about there.
there's two in there, estimating and job management. We go into some of these details a little bit more, and what you'll find, as Tara said there, she's really detailed on certain areas of the software, and mainly Tara, that's around making it simple for yourself with lots of notes and lots of detail around the estimate flows into the project management.
Exactly. You've got to think of, if I'm passing this on to the next person, can they understand where I've gotten to? Because everything we do, it's all staged, and you don't want to have margin erosion because someone's got to keep calling and saying, where is this? What did you mean? So just utilize the notes and set things out which are really logical.
Yeah, I can highly recommend that that estimating webinar with Tara. She makes fantastic use of the notes sections, even putting headings into her estimate costings lists. So some really detailed stuff that I would strongly advise anyone interested to certainly check out.
Yeah, really weird things that I didn't see anyone do before, like put loads of dots in there or like lines, and that creates like a page break just from
The
how
dashes,
that's it.
yeah.
Like little things like that, you just get from watching. So I really would recommend that. We might leave the questions there, guys, if that's okay. But look, there's a heap of things there in there that Ryan didn't cover. Obviously, mobile apps, customer portals, selections, to-do lists, accounting integration, job costing, financial reporting, and comparing actual cost versus estimated cost, a whole heap of stuff. And then you've got, cost plus and all these other different types of invoicing as well. So we try to keep this really simple. We went into a little bit of detail depending on where the questions kind of took us. But if you guys have any feedback in the chat, like considering what we tend to see with webinars is we sort of get to the hour when the drop-off rate starts happening, where people start going. We've not really had that this session. It's only been about 7 or 8 people have dropped off, which is awesome to see. So hopefully you guys are getting value from what we're talking about here, or mainly what Ryan's talking about. But if you have any feedback in there on what you would like to see us do more, like we're going to be hopefully starting to do more of these things, potentially in person in the office in Melbourne. Toby, we've got a little area in the office now that we might start trying to do this. We open it to a certain number of people to come into the office, and we still do the online portion of it. But if you have any feedback on things that you want to see, let us know, pop it in the chat. And maybe just while everyone's doing that, Tara, if you just give, because you and I caught up about a workshop that you're looking at running as well. Do you want to give people information around that?
Yeah, so the workshop is called it's estimating to handover. And basically the workshop runs from inception of what do you do when you get somebody call you up, an inquiry, how do you handle that, to then how do we look at a set of plans and all the consultant documents and best send out for RFQs. I do manually, I don't use the system. So that's how my method is. I don't use Buildxact to do that. All the way to the contracts admin component, which is something I've built a heap of templates external to Buildxact to help analyze that information. So for example, your prime costs and your provisionals, how do we keep the client informed throughout the project? Because there's nothing worse than getting to the end and realizing they owe you $100,000 and they've got no budget. So that's on you if that happens. We put all these things in place that we can monitor all of those things, and then all the way to the handover. And it's written that all of the documentation, all of the wording, the way we chat feeds into how your Buildxact operates. And then also how we, even to the point of setting up our file structure on our server, so that all that information that we're entering into Buildxact is really easily accessible from our server. Because again, we don't want to erode that margin because someone's calling up saying, where's the quote? What was the information? We just make everything really streamlined. And at the end of it, you get to basically spend an hour with me, one-on-one chatting and asking me anything, which is pretty valuable considering the amount of scope and builders we work with across Australia. So yeah, we're always talking to people about different things. So that's what we've written.
Yeah, I mean, from my side, it's like, look, for everyone else on this, it's not just Buildxact, not just external business, it's how you tie the two together, about your general business workflow and how you make that happen in Buildxact, where Tara recommends. But Tara, can you pop, you've already done it, I was going to say pop your email in there for people that want to jump on. But yeah, I got a few people saying, they'd like to, hear hear from Tara on that. So yeah, just reach out. I'm sure Tara, you'll reach
Yeah,
out to people.
absolutely.
But yeah, guys, any other feedback in terms of what you think you'd like to see? Certain areas we might go in more detail or less detail, or in the job management part. We've got an accounting webinar with Exact Accounting, who you guys might have seen before. That's just basically an Ask Them Anything, kind of an open slather. That webinar is next week. I'll pop it in the chat just before we head off, but that's a good one to jump on.
Yeah, I would suggest attending that if you are looking to level up and understand how all that works, because setting all your numbers up properly and estimating is going to make that correlation between the accounting side and knowing what you're actually making way easier. So it is a really good one to attend.
Yeah, I always stress this. Have people in and around your business that work with builders. You know, they're generally the best people. And, you know, Kurt from Builders Coach, if you've seen sessions of him, he always says this. It's who, not how. It's not how you do it all yourself. It's who you have in and around your business to help you do the things. You know, I don't like doing certain things around the house, so I get someone to do them.
Yep, same. And that's cool.
I found another one.
Everyone's got a good skill set. Yeah.
Can you send through their links, Julian? Can you give us some referrals?
Yeah, I can.
Around the house.
If you're in the Frankston area, Toby, you don't strike me as someone that wants to live that far out of the CBD because you can't get your fancy pants magic coffee that you were ordering. Yeah, Toby's one of those guys. But
It's an almond magic, thank you.
Almond magic.
Almond magic.
No. It's just a standard magic. Grill me all you want. That's all right.
Awesome, but we might finish it up there, guys. Ryan, thanks for going through that, mate. It's a lot of talking, a lot of detail, and some little curveballs at the loading screen. So I thought Ryan was amazing, guys. And yeah, thanks, Toby, for bringing you on. And Tara, as always, it's great having someone outside of the business giving feedback on terms of how to do things.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I thought Matt from Buildxact was going to be on there answering questions, but he seems to not have been doing that. So I'm not going to say thanks to Matt at all for that. But yeah, guys, appreciate giving you a huge amount of time out of your day. I know some of you still on leave, so really appreciate you jumping on. And hopefully this means we do more of these where you think that that is helpful for you guys. So appreciate it. The webinar, the recording will be up, so we'll let you know once that's all up and running. It'll be on that webinar page on the resources that I sent earlier on.
Also, just on those workshops, I get a list of everybody's information who's attended, so I can email out any information on that. But I have put my email and Instagram throughout the webinar chat as well.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
And just to close off, there's a couple of questions in
sorry.
terms of booking and training. Just go to the need help section on Buildxact and you'll be able to book in training either an hour or half an hour from there. So that will connect you with a CS rep. We'll be able to take you through any questions that you do have following on from this.
It's a tab in the bottom left corner of the platform. It says need help, click on it, and you can get access to booking training.
And that's how you raise support questions and stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do it that way. Cool.
Appreciate everyone's engagement. It's been awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
See ya.
See you guys.
Thank you.